Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to make the long-awaited Lucy jacket, which is a jacket actually from my own collection, which is sold out in my store thanks to you guys, but I thought it was the perfect time now to actually give you the pattern and to show you how to piece everything together. And it's not that hard, to be honest. It's actually a fairly easy project and the outcome is so cute. So keep on watching if you're interested. I just quickly wanted to say, just go ahead and follow me on my socials, especially on my Instagram, as I am sharing lots of behind the scenes footage, and I might also have a small thing going on, a small change in my personal life, and you can see a lot of that on my Insta stories. So go ahead and follow me there. But with that all out of the way, let's just jump right into the video. By the way, also the reason why I cut out my pattern pieces with two fabrics is very simple, because the main fabric is stretchy and the jacket doesn't call for a jersey or a stretchy fabric. That's why I have to accommodate for that by putting some interlining in there. And I just use some very lightweight woven cotton, which prevents the fabric in general once it is being sewn from stretching, as this one does not stretch at all. And yeah, that's just a small trick. You can obviously also put interfacing on, iron on interfacing that is non-stretchy. That will also prevent the stretch basically from happening. But the issue is, if you put some force onto the fabric, it will still stretch and it will destroy the interfacing that is ironed on. That's why I prefer to just put a completely different layer of interlining into my pieces. That way you are sure that it's not gonna rip, stretch, whatever. I'm gonna put interfacing on my outer fabric still on specific pieces that need it, just because it is a jacket and jackets always have interfacing on different parts of the pattern, just because it needs the strength. It needs to fall nicely, and the interfacing also makes it so that it doesn't, you know, it just looks better. So you have some specific spots where you put interfacing on as well. That would be the tighter portion down here under the bust, also the cuffs and the collar, which is very important because it really makes a difference and it makes the garment in the end look professional. Whereas if you don't put interfacing on, it always has this more wrinkly look to it. That is what it looks like once it's all laid out. I just put the pattern pieces as close together as possible to waste as least amount of interfacing as possible. It doesn't always work, like there are always some spots in there that are not usable, but I keep the big parts, and like stuff like this I throw away. For example, stuff like this might be still usable, or this here on the side, this is usable. So I make sure to keep all of the usable spots, and apart from that, I iron on the interfacing very lightly at first so that it sticks, and then before I iron everything on completely, because I don't want these blind spots to stick to my ironing surface, I cut out the different parts, or at least the different puzzle pieces that are together, and iron these on completely. And then I cut out the individual parts so that I don't have these spots on my ironing surface. Okay, this is the situation right now. I had a small problem with the recording that you just saw, so I am actually remaking the jacket with different fabrics because it's like right now and I don't have the fabric anymore because it's sold out, and so I'm making it out of a different kind of fabric where I also do not need interlining. So that is the thing that is different with this right here. If you have interlining, make sure to sew all pieces together, interlining and the piece it goes on, just in the seam allowance. So you just baste them together, basically. Once you've done that, the next thing is that we're putting the tight piece down here, the corset-like piece, I guess, together, and we're gonna do it by leaving the side seam open. In general, until we have the sleeves attached to the whole thing, we're gonna leave the side seams open because we're then gonna sew the whole side seam together. So now we have these two pieces here in the front. Those get sewn together, right sides together, also the other side right here, and then also these pieces here in the back. Make sure to have the pieces facing the correct way, as especially the side back can be confusing with the direction it goes. So just check that with the pattern pieces, you know, with this piece right here, and then you should be fine. We're also not overlocking as of right now. We're gonna do that in just a second. And once we sewed these pieces together, we're gonna overlock them as well, and then we're gonna top stitch. So now that I'm done with that, I also top stitch it to the respective sides. So that means to the side seams in the front and towards the back, or like the center back in the back pieces. Just gonna give it an overall press, and then we can continue with the next steps. And we're gonna take the corpus pieces, and we're actually gonna gather the lower hem. So that means that I'm going to stitch this with the biggest stitch that I have, not back tack on either side, and then just pull to make it fit the front, and then obviously also the back. So now that all of these pieces are attached to the upper body pieces, we're going to take the front pieces and actually sew the shoulders together. And only the shoulders, not the side seams. As I already said, we're going to put the sleeves in first, and then we're going to sew the side seams completely in one piece all together. I also went ahead and top stitched the shoulders into the back, and that's all that we're basically gonna do for now for the front piece. So we're gonna set that aside and actually go to the sleeves because they need a little bit of preparation. I put my sleeve pieces together, so the line in between the dividing seam is just a line that you can just put back together, which is just for aesthetic purposes, but I just cut out my fabric in one piece, and you can do that as well if you like. If you don't do that, if you have two separate pieces for your sleeve, just put the seam together right now, overlock it, and sew it towards the smaller sleeve piece. And once you've done that, we're going to prepare the folds in the sleeves. And the folds are marked in the pattern, of course, so there are notches right there which you need to cut into and mark them. And then there's also an arrow which points to where the folds are actually gonna face. So I just put some pins in there, which is just making sure that I'm gonna fold it the correct way, and that's what we're gonna do right now. And the next step, I'm gonna take my bodice piece right here, and because the side seam is still open, it's really easy to put the sleeve in. And it's really important that you pick the correct sleeve, because before that we put the folds in, right? And they need to face towards the front, and that's exactly how they should be laying down when you put it onto your piece. So I have everything right sides facing up, and that's making it much easier to see how and what way the sleeve goes in. So just put everything down, right sides up, and same goes to the sleeve, and then it's really easy to just figure out what sleeve goes where. And the fold right here is also the shoulder point, so that's where this one has to go. So after the sleeves are attached, I also top stitched the seam allowance into the sleeve just once all the way through. And now before we close the side seam, we're actually going to attach the cuffs on both sides. Just right sides together as usual. And I would also suggest to put the folded parts of the sleeve basically down when you're sewing, because it is a bit more, so it has a bit of fullness, I guess, in the whole piece. And if you can't manage, then you can also put another fold into the sleeve. That is no problem at all. That is perfectly fine, and everything should work out perfectly. And now that everything is finally in place, we can put the side seams together. And those are just gonna get stitched from the cuff hem all the way over the armhole to the hem of the piece. And there are a few things that you can match up. Of course, the tighter portion under the bust you need to match up so that it fits nicely here on the dividing seam. Make sure to fold the seam allowance facing down into the waist piece. Right here, you want it to face down, and that's due to, in just a second, when we put the facings there, the facing is gonna lay over top and we're gonna stitch it down. So you want it to be out of the way. And then here, we're also gonna put these two seams together. They already face into the sleeves. That's what we already did before because we top stitched it previously. And then the cuffs, they get folded into the cuffs, same here, because we're gonna fold the cuff down and also cover everything up nicely. And then obviously also the hem of the cuffs. Next step before we actually go to the collar, which is also almost the last thing, we also still have the zipper, but that's the end. We're gonna go to the facings. And those are in one piece or in two pieces, and we're just gonna close the side seams. Then also overlock the side seams and stitch them into the back piece as we did with the previous seams as well. And then we're gonna stitch the hem onto the hem of the actual piece. And now that the facing is one complete piece, I also overlocked the upper corner because that's gonna get important in just a second. So we're gonna put this down, right side up, and then put here, right side of the outer piece on top. And we're gonna sew once along this edge right there. And we're gonna iron everything into the outer piece, away from the facing. So we're gonna do the colors now since the jacket is almost finished. So we have the inner color, that's the one that has two pieces, and then we have the outer color, it's in one piece. And first thing that we're gonna do is we make one piece out of the inner color, so let's do that. And we're going to iron the seam allowance apart so that it lays flat. So I didn't overlock this one. In the color, we don't need to overlock anything. So that's all covered up by the other piece then. And we're simply gonna put right sides together of the colors. And so from the notch, right here is the notch. I have interfacing on top, but you can still see it. From right there all the way around to the other side and the other notch. And you will find that the inner piece is smaller than the outer piece, and that's how it's supposed to be, because then it's gonna lay nicer once everything is in place. So just make sure that you always have just 1 centimeter seam allowance. So even though it doesn't look like it's gonna fit, you have to make it fit. So once you've sewn here, it lays like this, and you will need to push the bigger color a bit down so that it's still 1 centimeter seam allowance, and that's what's gonna make the color look really, really nice. So we're gonna sew one time around from notch to notch. And we're going to put this right sides together with the upper corner here. And this is not how you usually do the color. You can obviously just sew the inner, so the smaller color, onto this piece, and then flip the seam allowance down, and then also sew this on top of the piece. I personally, for this here at least, don't do it, because I also don't do that for the hem. That has more to do with the fabric that I was using. It surely is no problem with this fabric right here, as this is a pretty easy fabric to work with. But that's just how I do it now, so I want to keep this the same throughout all of my production of the Lucy jacket, I guess. And we're gonna iron the seam allowance different than usually into the piece itself, just because it falls nicer and it looks also nicer. Normally you would put it into the collar. And lastly, we're gonna put the zipper in. So there is a good chance that you don't have a zipper that fits perfectly. I just happened to buy a zipper that fits the jacket, obviously, but if you have a zipper that doesn't fit perfectly, you can totally just do this yourself. So you would need some tools and just take out the teeth and the stopper right here and place it lower, and then you can shorten a zipper really easily. That's what I used to do as well, until I actually bought the zipper that has the right size. But don't worry if you can't find a zipper that fits your stuff perfectly. So this is always an option. And once you have your zipper, you are just gonna put, first of all, we can part the zipper first. You can just put right sides together like this, and it should end right in where the notch is. So I cut into the seam allowance all the way to my back tacked seam right here, and put the seam allowance out before I sewed it onto the piece itself. So this is my seam allowance that I am using for the zipper now, and I'm just gonna place it right here, making sure that the upper stopper right there, when you fold it, is about 3 millimeters lower than the edge right there. It's just gonna make it fall nicer. So that's what I'm gonna do. And once I am down here where the facing starts, I am actually only gonna pin the outer lower piece, the outer waist piece, to the zipper, and leave the facing just loose, and we're gonna deal with it in just a second. We're gonna kind of make the zipper disappear underneath the facing. It's gonna end about 2 millimeters higher than the hem, which is perfect, because then it folds nicely in the end. And we're gonna sew along the teeth of the zipper right here. And that's what it's gonna look like. We're going to iron. Before we do anything, we're gonna iron lightly the seam so that it's gonna fall where we want it. And we can go ahead and prepare the facing, which we do by folding 1 centimeter over, so the seam allowance, which is then gonna get turned on top. And I want to make sure that the fold covers this fold that we ironed before, because we're gonna stitch on top of that in just a second. And that top stitch needs to catch both the out and the inside. So make sure to prepare this nicely so that you're not gonna have any problems. And from now on, it's also more or less just preparation based, because we're gonna put the top stitches in now. And before we actually top stitch anything, we're gonna cut down the seam allowance behind the zipper, so that once it gets top stitched, you're not gonna see any of the seam allowance anymore. So we're gonna hide it basically behind the zipper. Just cut it down to like 5 millimeters or something, it's enough. And with this right here, we're also gonna fold it to the back. Maybe we have to cut it down a bit, maybe not. And we're just gonna fold it like this so that it lays nicely. And we're also gonna prepare this line right here. So we want all the seam allowances to face down into the waist piece, and then flip the waist piece up and then pin it down. So we want the overlocked edge to cover all of the raw edges of the bodice. And we can also give this a quick iron because it's easier then. It holds it all better in place. And now we're gonna start always from the outside. That is gonna be visible. We're gonna start top stitching right here from one zipper side to the other zipper side. And then we're gonna start from the center back, either on the bottom or on the collar, doesn't matter. And we go all the way around over the zipper right here, over the collar, all the way around the collar and down on the other side. And then last, we're gonna stitch the collar seam allowance down. And it already looks like a jacket and it's almost done. The last thing is the cuff. We're gonna overlock the hem of the cuff and then fold it inwards. Seam allowance goes into the cuff and we're gonna top stitch it, and that's the whole jacket. And that's it for today's video. I know that I kind of had this split thing going on right there. I am actually going to show you the actual Lucy jacket in the original fabric in the videos that I'm going to put at the end of this video. But if you're interested in what the second jacket, the white one that I made for this video looks like, go over to my Instagram and my stories. I will post a few videos and pictures of me wearing it. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It would mean the world to me. Also ring the bell if you haven't already to get notified every time I post. I post on Sundays, so you can keep an eye out for that, or also on every other day. I would be so happy if you could check out my other videos. I have so many videos on sewing and designing, so if you're interested in that, please go ahead and check that out. Also, follow me on my socials. The handle is the same as here on YouTube, so please check out the links in the description down below and give me a follow there. And lastly, thank you so much again for watching, and I'm gonna see you next Sunday. Bye guys!